My name is Curtis Dixon, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
On Schreiber. Snyder with scores! Now in front, Pannell scores! Hands off for Rabel, switches hands and scores!
Kylie O'Miller showing off those shifty skills.
Right off the bat, there's Lyle Thompson!
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hutton, he's Adam. Together we're bringing you interviews with your favorite players and coaches, as well as news from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues. Welcome everyone to another episode of Pro Lacrosse Talk. Today I'm joined by Dan Arestia, Pro Lacrosse Talk contributor and premier insider in professional lacrosse. You've probably seen his scoops on Twitter or articles on our website, and we're happy to have him make his podcast debut today. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, Dan, we really appreciate you joining us. This is your first time on the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast, but you're no stranger to Pro Lacrosse Talk. You've been writing for us for months now, and we've really enjoyed having you be part of the team. And we're really excited, kind of to talk about all this latest free agency news, as well as some player movement currently occurring between the MLL and PLL. And then later, Adam Moore is going to join me to discuss the crazy and controversial week that was in the NLL. But before we do that, let's get started with our fastest fast break.
It's time for the fastest fast break. We start off at Nassau Coliseum, where the New England Black Wolves are taking on the New York Riptide. The Riptide remain even keel with the Black Wolves throughout, but Andrew Pugh and Callum Crawford are too much for them to handle as the Black Wolves win 12-8. Riptide's second game of the weekend, they go to Rochester to take on the Nighthawks. The battle between the expansion franchises, Tank for Teat in full effect. This was a game of runs as the Nighthawks get out to an early lead after the second and deny a late comeback attempt by the Riptide to win 13-12. Then in Saskatchewan, the Rush are hosting the Toronto Rock in a battle between 2 heavyweights. Both Eric Kirk and Nick Rose put up gems, but it is the Toronto Rock who come out victorious 9-8. Then in Halifax's first game of the weekend, in the second matchup between these two teams of the season, the Bandits will prevail in Bandit land. They get the 13-9 victory to move ahead of the Thunderbirds in the standings. Then out in the Loud House in Colorado, it's the Mammoth hosting the Wings. This one was tight throughout, but Colorado, thanks to newly acquired Tyler Digby, got off to a large lead and thwarted a late comeback attempt by the Wings to win 11-10. Then we head to the controversy in Calgary, where the visiting Seals go toe-to-toe with the Calgary Roughnecks. This game started out as a shootout, with Dane Doby registering a sock trick in the first half, but Frank Sigliano came in to be San Diego's savior, as they get tremendous goalie play out of him, and some fortunate calls from the ref to take this Western matchup 13-12. Then the Swarm go all the way out west to take on Vancouver. Both teams desperate for a win, but the Swarm were all over the Warriors in this one as they get a 14-7 victory. And then the final game of Week 14, the Thunderbirds take on the Black Wolves, both in their second game of the weekend. The Wolfpack lights up the scoreboard as Callum Crawford and Andrew Pugh register 15 points between them as New England gets their second victory of the weekend over Halifax, 16-10. That's your fastest fast break.
All right, so that is our fastest fast break. Now I'd like to discuss these 2 big PLL trades with you, Dan. I'll start off with the trade that sent Myles Jones from the Chaos to the Redwoods in exchange for Sergio Salcido and a second-round pick. What were your thoughts on this blockbuster deal?
My first reaction to it was it's going to take some time before we really know who wins the trade or if this really was a good trade or however you want to try and break that down. Looking at sort of the parts individually, that draft pick, in some sports that are bigger where there's a million teams, the NFL, whatever, with 30-something teams, the NBA with 30-something teams, a second round pick might not seem quite as sexy of an asset to be throwing in there, but when your league has 7 teams in it and the second round pick is the 13th pick in the draft, that's an impact spot. That's an impact player. If you take a look at, I like to go by Paul Carcaterra's big board. He's been doing some great content, from that point of view. You look at his top 10 guys, the 10th ranked guy on his big board is Jeff Teat. You look down his list, guys like Ryan Terefenko and Peter Durth and impact two-way middies like that aren't even on there yet. Those are guys that are ranked, 6, 7 just in their conference on Cark's big board. That pick was something that I think really carries some weight. But, really I think that second round pick for the Chaos probably becomes the place where they try and address the loss of Kyle McClancy, and that's why I had mentioned Dearth and Terafenko as possibilities in that spot if they don't go earlier. Looking at the other pieces, Salcido going to the Chaos, my first thought was I didn't really quite get the fit for him there. The Chaos have some ball dominant players, as it is. They had some possessions during the year, even some where people were wondering if it was a problem where, Connor Fields will carry the ball for 30, 35 seconds or so of a possession. And, there are times where he should do that. This is a guy who's as good as anybody on earth at getting his own shot and scoring spectacular goals. But, Salcido is a guy who I think of personally as a lefty creator, as somebody who maybe can play on the lefty wing for them or in lefty alleys. But, they have Fields who needs to dodge. They have Ficarro, who's a good north-south dodger for them. They have other guys who are going to want the ball in their stick, and there's a lot of guys who are going to want shots on that team. And I know Salcido is going to be a guy who wants to be in that creator role, wants to be a midfield alpha on offense kind of guy. And, 52-second shot clock and not that many possessions means maybe his role isn't as big as he would like. So that was where my mind ran to it right away. Of course, the Chaos could easily just change up their style of play. They have assets and they have pieces. They have all these attackmen. They have just a wealth at attack and can decide they want to do something different than they did last year or change up their style a little bit. And, maybe they do that and they try and build a way to balance a little better where Salcido can do that. And that would be obviously Andy Towers was coach of the year. He's a guy you can trust maybe to make that move, make that adjustment.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned the wealth of attack. That's why I was surprised, there wasn't an attackman kind of included in this deal. And, I don't think the Redwoods are really I didn't think they were in bad shape after that expansion draft at all. I thought they were in the best shape out of anybody. So that's why I was a little surprised. So I wasn't really a fan of the trade just because I don't think either team really got better, but either team didn't really get worse either. It just, to me, it was just, a trade for a trade's sake in my mind a little bit. Obviously these are two very different players in Myles Jones and Sergio Salcido, and you mentioned, the pick is, huge too. I think that's a big win for the Chaos, who do need to replace, their short stick defensive midi, losing, McClancy. And then, on defense, I think there's some holes to fill too. They lose Brody Merrill, but their defense that kind of struggled down the stretch a little bit. So I was, hoping they'd maybe trade more for need. I don't know if they necessarily did that, but again, there's still plenty of time to make trades. And as you mentioned, this entry draft is going to be loaded. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and the college draft too. There's just so many good players available that it's kind of, like you said, tough to make a judgment on this just right away. But those were my thoughts. I mean, Myles, I think, is going to be a great fit though on the Redwoods. Him and Joe Walters have a lot of chemistry going back to the Bayhawks, and having him and Brent Adams or, a Sergio Perkovic on the same line is just insane to kind of think about. I know Joe Keegan added too that the lefties have scored on 40% of passes from Myles in 6-on-6 sets last year. That's a really high percentage, and I think that, makes him going to fit well in with Cavanaugh, who's a lefty on attack, and obviously we know Matt Cavanaugh can kind of do it all. He's a good feeder, but also a good finisher as well. So, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tough to tell, but, it definitely made a splash. It definitely, got our interest all week. We recapped that a little bit in our article we have on the website, just how much it sent social media into a storm, and I think that was by design, but it certainly worked in that regard.
Yeah. I kind of like Myles to the Redwoods. I think, I looked at sort of the season that Sergio Perkovic, you had mentioned him last year, had where in the beginning of the year, I think his players were getting used to the PLL rule set and finding their way around the field and how they could, adjust their game to it. I think Perkovic had a bit of a hard time with that. You saw him, he just seemed like there were days where he was just struggling to get going. But by season's end, Nat and that Redwoods coaching staff had gotten Perkovic comfortable in this role where he was at wings on faceoffs. He was, a meaningful player on the defensive end. And when you're able to do that with a midi like him, those opportunities in transition are going to come, and you see he can hit a 2 like he did in the title game from the parking lot. So, if you're in a position where you can have a defense out there with the stout poles that they have, whatever 4 poles they decide to put on the field, whatever Notre Dame defense they run out there, along with, Perkovic and Myles playing quality short stick defense, and then they go to clear with John Sexton and Myles Jones and Sergio Perkovic running down the field at you. it's tough to even try and sub off with all three of those guys going down the field. That's just a way you can really, really put pressure on the other team with a transition game with players like that. So if Nat can provide some of that polish to Myles to really build that two-way midi the way he did with Sergio by year's end last year, I think then you've got quite the monster at the midfield on your hands with the Redwoods.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think they're the team that really, I don't really see any holes, I mean, again, they didn't lose anybody really in the expansion draft, too detrimental to their team that they couldn't replace. Obviously Karolinus goes to the Waterdogs, but you have Larkin Kemp waiting in the wings, and then they lose Westberg. But, Clark Peterson, we forget that he was, getting a lot of time on attack before Ryder Garnsey came into the picture too. So he's another guy that I think is going to, come back and maybe see an increased role. You got Jojo Marasco. I mean, they're just loaded right now. So yeah, I think, really early in the spring here to make a claim, but I think the Redwoods are my favorite right now to, make a run for that championship. Yeah. And then we had another trade, too, that we were expecting a little bit more. We didn't know which team would end up on, but Romar Dennis gets his wish and is traded to the Atlas. Atlas acquire the Chrome's 20th overall pick, while the Chrome get their 17th. So really, they just exchange third rounders, and the Chrome move up 3 spots in return for Romar Dennis. So kind of a steal for the Atlas here. You had him going to the Archers in one of your proposed deals that we had on our website. Had a lot of fun with that. I had him going maybe to the Chaos, but he lands on the Atlas. How do you think he'll fit in with this Atlas offense?
I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think, primarily I think the change of scenery is important. He'd spoken with me, earlier, and then he spoke again to Paul Rabel on Paul's Unbuckled Chinstrap podcast. Yep. And he, sort of the challenges of the role he had in year one and going unprotected and dealing with that. It's interesting. I don't know if you heard it, but Romar talking to Paul today had mentioned the Archers too as a possible landing place where he thought he might fit, because they're a team that needs a quality, really good dodger out of the midfield. Mm-hmm. You have Captain America, you got Schreiber, but they lose Ipe, and it's tough to see if Ryan Ambler is going to be that kind of guy at the midfield, but Romar would provide that. But he goes to the Atlas, and I'm honestly not convinced it's the best spot for him. There's a lot of guys on that team who need shots. There's a lot of guys on that team who want to get the ball in their stick quite a bit as well. And then, for me, I consider sort of the 18-man roster. And when you start breaking it down, you've got, you're probably going to dress 5 poles. So if you get a penalty, you don't play man down with a shorty. Yep. You're going to go 5 poles, probably going to go 4 attack. You go 1 face-off guy. You go 2 goalies. That leaves you room for 6 middies. 2 of those guys maybe are going to try and be short stick specialists. For the Atlas, you call it Richard and maybe Unterstein or something like that. And then that leaves you have to pick 4 from Rabel, from Busick, from now Romar, from John Crawley, from Joel Tinney. He's absolutely an impact guy too. I try and find the places or the times where you're really going to be able, you want to make sure that you traded for this guy, that you can get him in the 18. And, this is the kind of roster decisions that Ben Rubior is going to have to be making now. So that midfield spot has a lot of guys in it. And like I said, there's a lot of guys who are going to want to take some shots. Busick is going to want shots. You've got Ryan Brown out there. You've got, Paul is a great passing midfielder. And I think Joe Keegan had said he's near the league lead, if not the league lead in that hockey assist stat.
Yeah, he was the leader in secondary assists. Yep.
He's the guy who's going to do that. And there's a lot of guys who are going to need some shots. And I hope Romar gets in a place where he's comfortable, being on the field more. I know he had mentioned his time was limited with the Chrome, and he only was taking, 2 shots a game. So it was tough to find rhythm. I would hate to see that sort of happen again, where he's in an offense where there's a lot of middies that are going to be on the field and a lot of guys who are going to be taking some shots, and you want to make sure he gets his share there. So, for that reason, I wasn't totally convinced the Atlas was the best spot for him, but I think the coaching staff that's there is probably going to be a better match for him, it sounds like, and hopefully they can come up with a system where he can get the touches he wants.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think he has the opportunity, if he can really develop to be, another deep threat for them. But you're right, this limited roster, that we're down to 18 is definitely tough, and I know he personally thinks that too. I reached out to him. We're going to put out like an Instagram post on him, and he told me he's looking forward to getting to training camp, working hard, and hopefully cracking this roster. So I don't think he takes that for granted at all. And I think you can kind of see him really refocusing for this season. And again, like you said, I think a change of scenery is good for him. Whether we don't think the Atlas is the best spot for him remains to be seen, but at least he does have that change of scenery, and he is able to now, kind of have a fresh start in 2020. But that kind of concludes the big trades from the PLL perspective. We also, though, had a lot of player movement that you actually were the one that released, Dan. So let's talk a little bit about, you released a list of 8 people. You had quite the news day on Tuesday. I think it's safe to say you firmly cemented yourself as the go-to guy when it comes to the Pro Lacrosse scoops. I know Jake Fricaro went as far as to call you the Woj of Pro Lacrosse, which I have been saying internally, but now, you're actually getting recognition from a professional athlete, so who cares about my word? Jake Fricaro is the guy who said it. But how's it been kind of, accepting that role? Let's start before we kind of get into these 8 guys that you mentioned. How's it been kind of becoming that go-to guy? A little bit tell me a little bit about how that transformation has come about.
Well, it's nice of you to say, and it was nice of Jake to say as well. I sent him a quick note, and I just said I appreciate the shout and everything. I don't think of myself as Woj caliber. I don't think anybody is Woj until they're, at the draft with a thesaurus and they're tweeting out, NBA draft picks minutes before they happen on TV and just using funny flowery verbs to do it. I think until you're doing that, you're not quite Woj. But, it's nice to be thought of that way, I guess. It's nice of people to think of me as somebody they can trust when it comes to this kind of thing. I've talked to you about this before, but for me, just as like a sports fan, like my favorite times in sports, when I love the NBA. I'm a suffering Knicks fan, so what else do I have to look forward to other than the off season? But for me, it's all about that week right when free agency starts or when the trade deadline is hitting, and there's just rumors everywhere, and people want to talk about contracts and who's going to go there. Can you believe they're going to maybe include this guy in the trade? I heard this, all the way down to like the weird social media stalking of like so-and-so saw this player at the airport in Chicago. He's totally going there or whatever. I love that element of being a pro sports fan. And I want so badly for Pro Lacrosse to have that as well. It's for me, I'm trying to, use some relationships that I have, and that kind of thing, just to bring that to fans. It seems like people enjoy it. It seems like players enjoy it. I think it's a fun part of the pro sports landscape, and it's one that's been missing kind of from Pro Lacrosse for a long time. I've been around and been a fan of Pro Lacrosse since the MLL started. I was going to Harbor Yard to see the barrage all the way back when. So, but a year ago when the PLL was launching and they were like, we're coming out and the players are coming soon, and all anybody wanted to do was try and figure it out. Who's going to go? Who's going to stay? I was like, this is great. And it would be great if we could do something like this every off season or at trading deadlines or in trading windows in the case of the PLL, whatever it might be. Like this kind of buzz is so good for the game. Let's just keep it going. Let's keep doing this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've really enjoyed it. Me and Adam, we watched the MLL, and now, with the PLL emerging, it was, like you said, the biggest question was, well, who's going to which league? And this offseason, I don't think it's a hyperbole to say that it's been the best offseason of professional lacrosse, and that's because we get to talk about this and, talk about the player movement we're going to talk about, too, with guys going over to the league and, who's staying and why they're doing it, too, which I think often gets overlooked, that people want to put these players into a box kind of and say, okay, well, this person's going to the PLL and this person's going to the MLL. But really, a lot of them have tough decisions that are based on, where they live, where they want to settle down, what other leagues they play in. A lot of NLL guys are comfortable playing in just a league that they're going to find the most time at. And I think that's an important thing to not get lost in all this. But yeah, we really appreciate you, finding that, being that detective, putting on that detective hat and kind of finding out the information. I know a lot of people on Twitter have enjoyed it as well, but not everyone was too impressed. Tell me a little bit about Matt Cavanaugh, why he wasn't a fan. You kind of ruffled his feathers a little bit, I think, earlier.
Oh man, so when Jake Fricaro called me called me Woj, Matt replied to him and he was like, "Oh, you mean the guy who got the Myles and Salcido trade wrong?" And I wanted to like clarify to them. I was like, "Listen, what happened is I saw Mike Commodore tweet it. I was like, I think it's true. I'm going out here and saying, I'd heard different things, whatever. But it looks like Kami got this one. All credit to him. This trade's happening." Mm-hmm. And then I had heard, from some people that it wasn't accurate. That the words used were that Mike's tweet was inaccurate.
Yeah.
So I said, "Hey, I'm hearing it's inaccurate." And then of course it comes out that it is true. So I tweeted the Cav. I was like, "Listen, that's what happened. Hand up. It's on me. I got that one wrong." And then Cav said he'll never take me seriously because I left him off my protected player projected roster.
Yeah.
And I was, oh man, he hit me hard with a Jonah Hill gif, super bad gif. And I think that kind of stuff's fun. Mm-hmm. I'm in my heart of hearts, I'm assuming Cav is most of that is having a good time, and I'm not really, these guys are pro athletes. I'm sure their hides are pretty thick, and they're not getting too offended by something like my, random guy's protected player projection or whatever. But, I thought, it was fun, and I hope Cav was having fun with it too, and that is what it is. I hope I don't get too many more wrong though.
Yeah,
I won't be able to stay in this business if I keep getting them wrong all the time.
Yeah, well, I think that might have been your first one, and that one, to be fair, was going back and forth a lot. But yeah, no, my first thoughts actually when I saw Cav tweeting that, I was just like, wow, Cav read our article, which I thought was great, and then I was like, Dan, that's how you know you made it. You have a professional athlete coming at you about something that you said. So I took it too with just some playful banter, and I just thought it was a little great back and forth, and I don't think it's puts a damper too much on your street cred, because if that's the only one you got wrong, I think you're a good spot. But yeah, let's kind of go into I'll just list off these players that you mentioned. We have right now 8 that you released are expected to join the PLL. We have the biggest name, obviously, Rob Pannell. That's not too big a surprise there. And then we have Rylan Reese, who was on the Cans last year. Jesse Bernhardt, who was on the Bayhawks last year. His brother Jake, obviously, is in the PLL. They both won championships last year in their respective leagues. And then you have Christian Mazzone, TJ Camizio. They were both on the Blaze last year. Eli Gobrecht, Finn Sullivan, who were both on the Outlaws, and then Craig Chick, who was on the Rattlers last season. So, some guys that really, you have a good mix. You have some veterans like, Bernhardt and Pannell, as well as some guys who only played one season last year in the MLL, like, Reese and Craig Chick. So, there's a lot of talent right there. Some solid names. Obviously, those aren't all the people that are coming over. We do have to fill 14 of these draft slots, so I reckon there's probably around 20 to 25. I don't know. What have you kind of been seeing? How many do you think are actually coming over?
I had heard a long time ago, not that long ago that I should say, it wasn't all that recently. Mm-hmm. I had heard the number was around 30.
Okay.
So, whether or not that's still the case, I guess we'll find out. It's a substantial number of guys though. Yeah. And I think an interesting part of that is you'll have all these guys who are veterans coming, and then you're also going to have this college draft coming, and just the numbers game with the guys that are already there, there just ain't that many spots. Like, there's 18 spots times 7 teams. There's 126 guys dressing every weekend. And there's going to be well more than that in this league. There were 150 something this year, mm-hmm. and we're adding 6 draft rounds worth of guys to the league. We're going to have that glut of talent, and there are I think there are different ways that'll play out in terms of where guys wind up playing and everything. I plan on trying to cover that and write a little bit about that sort of in the coming weeks as we get closer to the actual entry draft and college draft time, but I think that's a dynamic that's worth mentioning, and some people have replied to me or messaged me on Twitter about it. Is you keep dropping these names, we got drafts coming. Where are all these guys going to go? And it's a fair question.
And I think that's why the nice thing about having 2 leagues, is that these players now have a lot of leverage. have leverage with, what contracts they sign. And I think, you'll see the college draft. I think you'll see some, fairly big names maybe make the decision to go to the MLL. It depends, a lot. It depends on a lot of factors. Maybe they get a full-time job out of college that they want to pursue, and it makes it easier on them to be in, one location half the year. Maybe it is the fact that they think they're going to get more playing time, and they've, we're told that they're going to be the go-to guy, on this team, where that's not really as guaranteed in the PLL, just because more talent is in the PLL. That is a fact. That's not to say there's not premier talent in the MLL, but that is the fact right now, and those rosters are much smaller. So you're right. It's definitely going to be a guessing game with, who ends up where, and I think these teams could look a lot different than what they were last year.
Yeah. There's definitely no shortage of talent still in the MLL. I would still happily buy a ticket to go see an MLL game. There's lots of guys out there that I would pay to watch play. It's going to be interesting because it's tough now. PLL players, pretty much the standard deal for guys with very few exceptions, was a 2-year deal. And so obviously this is year 2. So, as you're seeing guys flow from one league to another, it's kind of a one-way street this year. That might not really be the case if you're looking at spring in 2021, where maybe some guys decide they want to go back to the MLL because, like you said, guys want playing time, and these guys, you want a full game check. You want to get paid, and in these leagues, get that full salary check, that full share of your salary. You got to be on a travel roster. Guys who don't dress don't make as much money, so guys are going to want that. There are guys who might count on that as part of their income, or that becomes something that's more important to them. And I would also add that there are guys who put a priority on playing summer box lacrosse, and maybe one league is more open to the idea of guys saying, this week I'm going to go play summer box and I won't be at my MLL or PLL game or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And whatever league is like, okay, we're cool with that, versus maybe where they're not cool with that, that's going to be where the summer box guys maybe want to go.
No, absolutely. And I think that you see a lot of that, a lot of NLL guys who are, playing field, they view it as another way to, keep the sticks in their hands. But yeah, like you said, they have priorities with the Summer Box League, and again, their main season is the NLL. So yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And that's not to say it's favored in one league versus the other, because, we've seen guys like Westberg and Curtis Dixon and Dane Smith commit to the PLL. And then there's other guys like Lyle Thompson and Randy Stotts and Shane Jackson that are, in the MLL. So it's a good mix of a lot of, NLL talent in both leagues. But that's definitely something to consider. And that brings me to the final thing I want to talk about with the player movement per se is Zach Currier. We don't really know where he's going to end up. We've heard different things. He was on the Outlaws last season. He's more of an NLL first guy, I would say, I guess, with the Roughnecks, but he was a top guy in the MLL as well. Where do you think he'll end up?
I had heard that the Outlaws looked like the place he was going to go back to. And then, more recently than that, I'd heard that the PLL was going to offer him a substantial amount of money that would be hard for him to turn down. If I had to bet today, I would bet he goes to the PLL. But having heard from essentially both sides of the coin, from MLL and from PLL, people with knowledge of the situation, I would say, that both sides of that have told me, oh yeah, he's going to come here. It's tough to nail it down. It's really tough to nail it down. So my gut tells me that the PLL offers him a salary that's pretty solid, and he takes it to go join the PLL. And that's not to say that the money is the only reason he does it. Mm-hmm. I think that the talent level and the challenge of playing in the PLL is probably appealing to him. Yep. As a competitor and everything. I know there's other guys from his indoor teams and his from Team Canada and everything that would be teammates of his if he went, maybe, depending on where he lands. I don't know where he's landing if he goes. Don't construe that in any weird way, but he certainly has those connections and those relationships in place in the PLL. He has them in the MLL too, but the PLL is certainly they're there, and there are something he could move towards. So my gut tells me PLL for Zach Currier. I can't put a percentage on it or anything like that, but that's kind of where I think he would wind up.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be on the lookout to see where he eventually signs. And then, we got the lottery results from the PLL, so that's something too that we're now monitoring, because we still haven't had official confirmation that these guys are in the entry draft, and we haven't gotten the full list of entry draft participants. But the lottery results are out. The Waterdogs will pick number 1 overall, followed by the Chrome, Atlas, Archers, and then it deviates a little bit based on the percentage. The Whipsnakes actually got the 5th, which is amazing to me because they only had 1 ball in the lottery.
Yeah, the 1%ers.
Yeah, it's crazy. But that's pretty big gain for them. And then it would be the Redwoods and the Chaos. That is the order of the lottery picks. It is a big belief, as you mentioned, that Rob Pannell is going over. Do you think the Waterdogs will take him at number 1 overall? I mean, that's the general consensus, but do you think they'll mix it up and maybe take somebody else?
I was messaging with some other lacrosse people before I jumped on with you guys tonight, and I was texting with them, and I was like, I'm trying to come up with scenarios where the Waterdogs don't take Rob Pannell number 1. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, the Waterdogs went attack heavy in the expansion draft, so maybe they try, if Zach Currier is in it, maybe they try and take him. And then, maybe the Chrome decides we have Jordan Wolf, so we don't want to take Rob Pannell. So then Rob Pannell winds up on the Atlas. Like, I was trying to come up with a scenario where Rob Pannell plays with all the Team USA guys on the Atlas. But, at the end of the day, these guys and girls would text me back and be like, yeah, that sounds cool, except if Rob Pannell isn't available in the draft and you're picking, you take Rob Pannell. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So,
it's hard for me to think of a way where the Waterdogs don't want to take Rob. With the guys that they drafted, and this is, to Coach Copeland's credit, makes himself available for this, but he has guys at the attack spot who have been run out of the box before, and Cuccinello, the Whipsnakes, I think, even ran Reeves out of the box a little bit. So, if he wants to move around where those guys go, Ryan Drenner is probably going to be sitting on that righty wing, and you can bet Kieran McCardle will be playing on the left. But if you wanted to try and make space for Rob at X with their personnel, they're able to do that and still utilize those attackmen that they drafted. So, that's excellent move by Coach Copeland in the expansion draft with the foresight that, if this was coming, I have the ability to put Rob Pannell in with these guys that I already drafted via expansion. So it's tough to think that Rob won't go first. After that, it gets a little dicey, but I think Rob will go first.
No, absolutely. I tend to agree with you. And you mentioned, you talked to Coach Copeland. I talked to him too. He mentioned that how he was looking for versatile guys. And he said too, he's like, there's a lot of great attackmen available, but he knew there was going to be attackmen probably available in the entry draft. He knew there was going to be ones in the college draft as well. And he said it just wouldn't make sense for me to show up to training camp with a plethora of attackmen and wouldn't do anyone any good. So he definitely had the foresight. Whether he knew they would get number 1 pick, obviously, this was the lottery. He didn't, there was no guarantee. Whether he knew Rob was even going over to the PLL, we don't know that either. But good on him to kind of have the foresight to, get a more of a Swiss Army knife type of team that he can really, plug and play some guys where he needs them to. So that wraps up our PLL coverage. We're going to take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll get into our MLL Supplemental draft discussion. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. We've been using Anchor for our podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast so it sounds great and send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Better yet, they connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Today's show is being brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium. You can use Stitcher Premium to listen to shows ad-free such as Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, My Favorite Murder, Wolverine the Lost Trail, or our favorite, The Fantasy Footballers. For only $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year, you get access to Stitcher Originals, bonus episodes, and comedy albums. Better yet, if you go over to Stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code lacrosse today, you can get 1 month free. So head on over to Stitcher, sign up, and get your free trial today. All right, so welcome back. Let's kind of switch gears now to the MLL a little bit. You were actually at the Hammerheads press conference that they had last week. So we're going to listen to some of that sound that you got.
I could not be more delighted from a Major League Lacrosse perspective, that we're launching a new franchise here in the state of Connecticut, and more specifically right here in Fairfield. And we look forward to being here for a very long time, and we want to bring an experience to remember for our newfound Connecticut Hammerheads fans.
We know we've learned a lot about this market and the growth of lacrosse here in Connecticut and in Fairfield County specifically is really important to our vision. But again, this is not about lacrosse. This is about being a community partner, working with community organizations that are lacrosse-centric, not lacrosse-centric, the local media, local businesses and organizations, and we've already felt that welcome, welcoming feel from the local community and businesses across the board. So we're really excited to dig in. There's a few things that are more, I guess, operationally centric that we're focused on right now with ticket sales and preparing jerseys, which this is the first look at the jerseys. If you wanted to hone in on that, we haven't released these officially yet, but that's a good sneak peek. Our schedule was announced last week, so we have a lot of operational moving parts that are really exciting as our team starts to dig in and get ready for May 30th and opening day. So I thank you for sharing that vision, because it's really important to the community-centric element of what we're trying to accomplish here. Amongst the 6 teams in our league, we talk on a daily basis about what should we be focused on, and one of the big conversations that we had in making a decision to position ourselves in Connecticut and be here is that opportunity alone. I mean, between Long Island and Fairfield County and really the state of Connecticut, the opportunities are endless for the number of people playing lacrosse. You mentioned the 31,000 active lacrosse participants. That's a huge opportunity. So whether it's the battle for the sound, I know our last game, last home game here is against the Lizards. So I'm pretty confident we'll have something beefy for us to talk about and get excited around. And the players alone, they have roots, right? Long Island, or the New York Lizards have a lot of players who are from Long Island, and I don't think we'll be without Connecticut-based players. The activity amongst the players, or the groundswell amongst players in our league who want to be here is very significant. They are excited about this move.
I know Sean Evans is on the roster, who I know from box lacrosse a lot, and he's kind of somewhat of a legend in the lacrosse world. Is there a cross-pollination with box lacrosse and the MLL?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this over the last, I've been in Major League Lacrosse for the last 5 seasons, and in the last 5 years, we've seen more and more indoor players play the field game and vice versa. The indoor league has expanded to 13 teams, and as they continue to grow, it opens up more opportunities for field players, and I think ultimately inside our sport, more players like Sean Evans is a full-time lacrosse player, whether he's playing indoor from November through the end of May, and then outdoor from May until the end of August. It's a really important piece for the growth and development of making everybody, or not everybody, but our athletes full-time. It's a tremendous opportunity. There's more marketing and endorsement deals in lacrosse than there ever has been. 5 years ago, if you were the first overall pick in our draft, you're probably getting some type of endorsement deal and of nominal dollars. But today, those endorsement deals run deep. You're talking top 20 players, top 30 players are getting those types of deals, which is an important piece for the long-term growth of professional lacrosse.
All right, so now that we've heard some of the sound that you got, give me some of your thoughts from this press conference.
I think it was something where, as the MLL continues to sort of get their strategy for this offseason built and everything, and even since last year, for them it's been all about the community connection and the sort of building in a market and establishing partnerships in that market to try and build their presence there. And that sort of was a lot of what you heard, I think, from Ian and from the commissioner, from Sandy and everything, where, for them, it's all about building that partnership. So they're doing it, you saw it at the press conference where they had the Fairfield First Select Woman there. You had officials from Fairfield U, where the Hammerheads are going to play their games. They're trying to really build that connection with the community, and I think you heard that come through there. So that was my thoughts about sort of where they were coming from. I thought it was great that they had a local lacrosse club there. They had a bunch of kids that got to come out and run around on the stadium field and everything like that, and meet the guys and see the new uniforms and see the MLL gear and all that. So, I thought that was good, and you sort of build in some fans that way. These kids are going to be pumped to come back out in May and in June and throughout the summer to see some games. So, I thought it was pretty well done for the MLL.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a good move. It's a market that they hadn't been before. They had been in Bridgeport a long time ago, but that, obviously now they're in Fairfield, more central in Connecticut, and I think it was a good move by them to kind of again kick off their communal outreach. So yeah, I thought it was a good move. And then you also talked to head coach Bill Warder a little bit. He actually works at Hobart, so he's kind of back in that area per se, rather than being, having to fly out to Dallas. It's kind of, being in the Northeast is going to be more convenient for him. But he spoke, how he kind of built the team and, the addition of Will Sands. Obviously he has a lot of guys returning from the Rattlers. So let's listen to what he had to say.
We think we have a really competitive team. The roster we've put together so far prior to the collegiate draft is a group of guys that have won 7 of the last 8 games. So I think we're play exceptionally well as a team. Team concept, support each other, play super high energy. Our goal, simple and really keep it simple is to hoist that championship trophy at the end of the year. So that's what it is at the beginning of every season. And I know this group of guys, players, is believes we can do that. So have some good veterans, some newer, younger draft picks from last year. So it's a great mix of talent. And, as far as the rivalries, I know Ian mentioned that during the press conference a little bit. I think the obvious one, you were right in between Long Island and Boston. Those are can be two really natural rivalries. So I think it's whether it's the Battle of Long Island Sound or whatever it might be, but the Lizards are always put a good product and good team on the field. So we're super excited to play them. And the last game I coached in last season was against Boston, and Boston puts on an amazing show and venue, and looking forward to playing them as well.
Hi, Coach. This is Dan Arestia. I'm from Pro Lacrosse Talk. You guys sort of kicked off the player movement in the offseason with a big trade acquiring Will Sands. Can you just explain a little bit how Will fits into what you guys do, and if you are going to be sort of changing maybe your approach as an offense or anything like that as you approach the season?
Right. So midway through the season, the season last year, we were trying to rework the offense a little bit, and one of the catalysts in that was we were finally able to Zach Currier got healthy, and Jack is a player, was drafted 3 years ago, and was a torn and he was a torn and watch list guy, phenomenal player. He's a do-it-all attackman, dodger, feeder, shooter, highly skilled, exceptional player. We then inserted Brad Voigt. Brad Voigt's a pure lefty shooter finisher, and we had that really made our offense click because we had Bryce Wasserman, Bryce is a pure ex-Dodger, and so he's a all really exceptional player. Love Bryce. He's a all or nothing Dodger pretty much. So he's a guy that can dodge by anyone from X and can score his own goal. Will is a player who is incredibly balanced, feeder, dodger, scorer, leader. He's from Long Island. He balances, the combination of Curran, Voigt, Sean Evans, Sands, I think is, all around it's exceptional. It makes us a much stronger offense, balanced offense, stronger offense. Will has the ability, if you look at what, Mark Cochran did last year in Boston, a lot of that's due to a guy passing him the ball, and that's what Will is. I think I'm expecting big things out of Brad Voigt. You have a righty Dodger and Sands feeder, feeding it to a lefty shooter, that's a huge benefit to us. So it was a trade that was thought of, proposed, and it fit. Really, it's a great trade for both teams. So we're super excited about Will and what he brings, and his competitiveness and smarts and team mentality and leadership, and I'm super excited.
All right, so that's kind of what he had to say about, building this Hammerheads team for their inaugural season. These coaches also got to make some moves, too, because the MLL Supplemental Draft just occurred. We have the full list of draftees. It's going to be on our website and is also on the MLL website. So we won't go through all of them, but there are some guys that stood out to me. I'll let you go first, though, Dan. What were some of the guys on your list that kind of stood out that got taken in the supplemental draft?
A lot of those guys that got taken early on, I think are standouts to me. You saw Nate Solomon go to Chesapeake, and I know I'm sure for Nate it's been a frustration, but I think this is his third team maybe, or even his fourth team since he's been out of Syracuse. So I'm sure he's hoping that he sticks and he's got a home there, and he's he's definitely good enough to play. So I hope that works out for him. But he was a guy who jumped out to me. I thought the Bayhawks in particular made some selections where it was clear that they were not just looking for guys to fill spots and just be, warm training camp bodies. Mm-hmm. They were looking at guys who they thought could play for them and, guys who could make a roster. So they had some great picks. Drew Shantz getting picked, I thought was good. He was a solid midfielder at Notre Dame, and he dragged me on Twitter because I spelled his name wrong, and my journalism professors would be murdering me if they saw that. But Drew's a quality player as well. Guys like that being available at a supplemental draft level, tells you sort of a little bit about just the depth of talent that does exist in the MLL, that these guys can just be had either from the player pool or that other teams, even with 25 protected spots, just couldn't protect a guy like that. So, those were the guys that really jumped out at me. Certainly, I know a guy like Bobby Duvniak, who's from Manhasset, going to the Lizards, who is a really highly regarded recruit out of high school and had a really solid career at Harvard. Bobby can be a productive MLL player. So, there are guys in there that are going to make rosters. There are other guys, as you go further down the list where, they're a little more of an unknown, and you get the sense the teams were maybe trying to catch lightning in a bottle or grab a guy who just wows people at camp and then maybe makes a spot or something like that. But, there's meaningful guys there. The MLL did a good job this week, I think, on social media sharing images of guys from the past who were taken in the supplemental draft, and it's named, it's Greg Gorenlian, it's Dylan Ward. Like these are all world players that were sub-draft guys. So, there's names in this list who will be playing in meaningful minutes and meaningful games in the MLL this summer. So, it'll be interesting to see who the guy is that maybe was a bit down the list that everyone thought maybe was just a roster filler who turns heads this summer.
Yeah, no, for sure. And some of the things you kind of touched on a little bit that stood out to me, too, is, they tried to get some of these hometown guys. You have like a Jordan Crew, he's a Philly native, and, was a standout at Cabrini. They won the national championship last spring. He was picked up by the Barrage, and then you got a guy like, Anthony Joachim, who's on the wings, get picked up by the Barrage. And that kind of leads me into, there was a lot of NLL guys that I was surprised to see. The biggest name being Callum Crawford, who was drafted by the Bayhawks. So he right now currently leads the NLL in goals and points. I mean, having him play the field game, I think, would be huge. And he currently plays with Andrew Q, who is rookie with the Black Wolves, was taken number 3 overall in the NLL draft and is having a great season with the Black Wolves this year. He scored the game winner with the Bayhawks last season. So I think maybe they're looking to pair those guys together. Some other, names on the Bayhawks. You got Dan Lomas, who just had a sock trick against the Riptide this past weekend, and Holden Garland, who's on the Rush. There's some NLL talent that, some big names that are, kind of making the jump, I guess, to the MLL, you could say. And I'm excited to see kind of how they do.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to do for the MLL is to take, you mentioned some of the relationships that those guys have, put them in places where they're playing with familiar players and put guys out there who are names. Like you said, Callum Crawford is more than just a name. He's a really, really good lacrosse player. So putting him out there and he'll bring some fans with him, I'm sure, So I thought that was a good move. And then, like you said, the geographic connections for some of these draft picks. You know, the Lizards, every single player they took was from New York. The Philly Barrage, I think I looked at like 6 of the picks of theirs were Pennsylvania guys, if not directly Philadelphia guys. So, you know, I love that the teams are doing that. You know, I teased on Twitter today, just, you know, a little separately from this, but that the Barrage and the Lizards are actively engaged in discussions around a trade that will send Kevin Crowley to the Barrage. You know, especially in a market like Philly that's such a tight-knit lacrosse and sports community. They love having those local guys that they can cheer for. You know, Crowley is awesome with the Wings there, and, you know, he's a great ambassador for the sport. So having him on the Barrage in that market, I think, would be great for the league if that trade happens. But, you know, like you had said, the geographic connection around some of these sub-draft picks certainly makes sense in that regard. And again, like I said, it's not necessarily just warm bodies, and it's just because they're there. You know, they got drafted because, well, he lives in Pennsylvania and the team's there, so it's going to be easy for him to get to camp or whatever. You know, there's guys out there that are going to make a difference.
No, absolutely, and we're looking forward, you know, to seeing them play. And yeah, we talked to Spencer Ford, you know, recently. Adam did, and you know, he talked about that. He wants to kind of bring that Philly mentality to this Barrage team. It's not really. He doesn't view it as, you know, the Blaze getting supplanted into Philadelphia. He views it as a whole new team, a whole new, you know, opportunity to build a team from the ground up and embed in those Philly roots. So we're looking forward to it. Dan, this has been awesome having you on. We'll definitely have you on again. You know, we appreciate all you've done for the Pro Lacrosse Talk. And I think you've done a great job with a lot of your articles on that, you know, looking at things through a different lens. You did one where you examined all the best parts from the major 4 sports leagues and what that we could bring to lacrosse, and I think you're kind of, you know, starting to do that a little bit too with your own personal brand. But so I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast and, you know, helping us grow this thing.
Yeah, and if you remember in that article, I said what we really need is for social media to go nuts with rumors during the off season, because that's the best part of everything. And look what Myles Jones is putting on his Instagram story. He's just putting bears up and then deleting them, and you get a whirlwind of rumors around it, right? How fun is that?
Absolutely. You know, I think that the best thing. I mean, I think the thing you proposed was Justin Gutterding going to Redwoods Forest. I'm pretty sure that's pretty close to what we got. So
and sharing a photo with just an eyes emoji, like the eyes emoji is just doing wonders for our sport right now.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And I talked to Pat Harbison. Sometimes you can't tell if they're trolling us or not. Pat Harbison had no idea what they were talking about, but he joined in on the fun, and it got us all fooled. So it got us all talking. So it's good that the lacrosse players themselves, the players in these leagues, are having fun with it as well.
Well, they're the ones who got to make it go. You know, if they're not doing it, then the media can't talk about it. So I think that they're having fun, and you know, it's a great time for the sport.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you coming on, Dan. This wraps up part 1 of this mega podcast episode. You guys can head over to part 2 of this episode on our podcast feed, and we'll pick up with Adam and my discussion on this crazy NLL Week 14. Today's show is being brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium. You can use Stitcher Premium to listen to shows ad-free, such as Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, My Favorite Murder, Wolverine the Lost Trail, or our favorite, The Fantasy Footballers. For only $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year, you get access to Stitcher Originals, bonus episodes, and comedy albums. Better yet, if you go over to Stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code LACROSSE today, you can get 1 month free. So head on over to Stitcher, sign up, and get your free trial today.